Hello and welcome to TomiTalks TV. I have one singular goal with this show, and that is to help you make smarter decisions so that you can have better relationships. I'd like to start as usual by saying a very big thank you. Thank you for all your likes and your shares and your comments on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. I really, really appreciate you because you're helping us spread the message further faster. So thank you very much indeed. Now today have I got a surprise for you. I have got a very special guest with me on the show today. I'll tell you a little bit about her. Reverend Mrs. Laurie Whetstone Idahosa was born in Wilmington, Delaware, USA, to Reverend Dr. Gary and Reverend Mrs. Faye Whetstone. She married Bishop F. E. Benson Idahosa in 2002. She is a mother of three sons, Feb Jr., Nathaniel, and Judah. Laurie Idahosa is the co-founder of Nathan American Academy and Big Ben's Children's Hospital in Benin City, Nigeria, where she works as the Director of Campus Life in Benson Idahosa University. She is a national presbyter in the Church of God Mission International, Nigeria, and she also serves as a senior pastor of Church Unusual, CGMI, which is a pioneering branch which successfully targets youth. Laurie is a sought-after speaker, coach, and influencer. She's a brand ambassador and recently dabbled in modeling in Dubai and acting in Nigeria. She has authored three books titled Every Woman's Journey in 2014, Laurie Prays in 2017, and Laurie's 22 in 2018. Laurie Idahosa is the author of a life-transforming blog found at laurieidahosa.com and has contributed articles to numerous publications. She has won numerous awards for her humanitarian work, especially with internally displaced persons and youth. She continues to mentor thousands daily via her social media handles at Idahosa Laurie. Reverend Laurie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that very warm and beautiful welcome. I really appreciate it.
I'm so delighted to have you on the show. I mean, I've been super excited all day long, and I'd like to start by saying that I'm absolutely blown away by the work that you do, the inspirational work that you do. I spent a lot of time following you on social media and watching your videos and that sort of thing. And you're such a phenomenal encourager, and I see in what you do that everything that you do is for others. So it's obviously about others and not about self. And I just think that's absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you thank you. That's touching. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
It's such an honor to have you on the show. So we're going to go into a bit of a discussion now. My audience is a mix of singles and married people. And so I'd like to take them on a bit of a journey of your life, starting from your single years and then moving on to your marriage. So you and Bishop Feb had a bit of what I would call a fairy tale kind of love story. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how you met and the journey towards marriage?
Wow. Well, yeah, it's kind of an exciting story. I met my husband. Well, let me go back. When I was a little girl, all growing up, my parents have this proclivity towards missions. And
Right.
so I lived in Indonesia. We traveled all around the world as a kid
Wow.
growing up. And so travel and ministry and missionary work was all very much a part of my growing up experience. And so when I was 11, I took my first trip to Nigeria to Enugu
Right.
and fell in love with it. It was like love at first sight. But I hadn't met the Idahosas yet. And then somewhere in between 11 and 13, my father and the great Archbishop Benson Idahosa met, and they struck a very strong bond just from day one. And so Papa Idahosa invited my dad to come to Nigeria on a missionary trip.
Wow.
To come and minister in the ministry.
Mhm.
And so when my dad went, he said, let's all go. And so my dad went, I went, my mom went, and Papa Idahosa, he was one of the most hospitable men you could ever meet. And he had us stay in his personal home, which I thought was such an honor.
Wow.
And so we stayed in Papa's home, and I stayed in the room where his children were,
Mhm.
his daughters were, and my husband's room was across the hall.
Mhm.
And I just kept hearing all about Feb, 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 Feb. And I mean, even Papa Idahosa was talking about Feb before I met him in America. So I'm like, who is this Feb, you know? And what does Feb even stand for? And I was thinking February. Honestly, I thought his name was February. Um, so um, one of the days I was coming down the steps and he was coming up the steps in the hallway of his house. And that was when we saw each other. And it was like fireworks. It was like love at first sight. There was this massive chemistry, interest, excitement, all kinds of like bubbles going off. And, you know, as much as you can have. What's that?
I said at such a young age.
Oh my gosh, I was 13. Like I would never recommend this for any 13-year-old, especially as my kids are about 13 now. But we hit it off right away, and we built a strong friendship over the years. It was before the internet, so we had to actually write physical letters to each other, and we were writing to each other all the time. Sometimes I would get 2-3 letters in the mail, and he would get 2-3 letters, just because we're always trying to connect in some way. Then he moved to America during his high school years, and lived in Oklahoma, and that's in the Midwest, and I'm in the East Coast. But we still found a way to connect a bit more, because by that point we could talk by phone. And so we just kept building this friendship. He came and spent a Christmas with us, and just all kinds of, you know, just opportunities to get to know each other. And we just liked each other. So when he decided to go to Oral Roberts University for college, I decided to follow him and go as well. I had gone to Bible school before I went to the university. So he was in his senior year when I was coming in my freshman year. So I only stayed 1 year at ORU because I was only there to be with him. I didn't have any other agenda. Like I didn't care about my degree. I was doing fantastic in school, but I just didn't care. I just was there for Feb. And then he came back to live closer to where I live in America. He came closer to Delaware. He moved to George Washington University to do his postgraduate work. He got a master's degree in public health from GW. So it was just about a 3-hour drive. So I was back in Delaware going to school, and he was there. So we would meet halfway, and we just kept building and building and building. But over time, we started to drift a little bit more apart. His father passed away in 1998, which was extremely tragic and shocking to all of us. And it kind of changed the trajectory of his life a little bit. He was going to medical school in London at the time, and he had to leave medical school to go back to Nigeria. And when he went back, our paths didn't cross quite as often. And so we kind of drifted apart, and I started another very serious relationship. And he kind of had some serious relationships too, but he never talks about it. And so we weren't really doing the whole relationship thing at that point. But in 2001, when the World Trade Center issue happened in New York, he was on a plane on his way to the US for a conference that he was speaking in. And his flight was rerouted to Canada. And so he calls me from Canada, and he's like, you know, everything I was coming to America for was canceled. If I come, I have an option. I can go to where I was going, which I really don't know what I'm doing there. He's like, because everything I was going there to do is canceled. He said, or I can come to Newark, New Jersey, and if you guys could pick me up, then, you know, maybe I can spend a couple weeks with you and your family. And so I'm like, absolutely, come. So my mom and I went to Newark, New Jersey, and picked him up and put him in a hotel because my parents were going out of town at the time, so he couldn't stay in the house with me, and I couldn't stay in the hotel with him. So we're trying to, you know, do the whole separate thing so we're not getting ourselves into trouble.
Yes.
And so there was one night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, we're sitting out in front of his hotel in the car, and we're talking, and I was telling him some very private things, and he was telling me some very private things and some struggles that we were going through. And he said, you know, Laurie, I trust you. And I said, well, I trust you too. Wow. And he's like, no, like, seriously, I trust you. I can tell you anything. And I know that you'll always have my back. And I'm like, of course. And so throughout the course of that conversation, he was like, well, why don't we just get married? I can't see why I'm not marrying you if I trust you this much. And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. Because it was always Feb. No matter who I was with, I would break up my relationship quickly so that I could be with him every time he came in town, and vice versa. It was just always Feb. And so that was the first time he asked me to marry him. Now later he asked me to marry him officially. He got down on his knee and he gave me a ring and did all of it. But that at that point, we made kind of a commitment to each other to work towards marriage. And he was worried because I had been so established as a single person. I had foster children. I owned my own homes. I owned my own businesses. I was a pastor in my church. I was very, very settled and established for somebody in their mid-20s. And he was really worried that I wouldn't be able to leave all of that, and I wouldn't be able to really adjust to the life in Nigeria. So he brought me to Nigeria as even though I was technically his girlfriend, he brought me like for Christmas, that Christmas, so that was September. By December, he said he wanted to have a conference and he wanted to invite me as a guest speaker. And and it just happened to be over the Christmas holiday so that I would be with all of his family and his sisters and everyone. And the whole purpose of that trip was basically to see if I could gel with his family, and to see if I could gel with the Nigerian community and if I really wanted to live there. And I fell in love with Nigeria all over again.
Oh, wow.
And and of course with him.
Yeah.
And so we got married October after that. So so it was about a year from September 11th to October when I now became Mrs. Feb Idahosa.
Oh, wow. That's
my dream name.
I think that bit about trust is so interesting, though. That's clearly very fundamental in your relationship. And I always say to people, you can't marry someone that you don't trust, because trust is like the bedrock of any marriage.
Absolutely.
And I think it must be really difficult for people who are in a marriage where they feel like they can't trust their partner. I think that's,
and it's difficult too for public figures. Somebody like Feb Idahosa, he's the only biological son of the great Archbishop Idahosa. So a lot of people, he was on magazines as the most eligible bachelor, and he had, people thought he had all this money, which we later knew that he really didn't, but people thought that he had all this, he was, there was all these preconceptions about him that, so people were interested in him for the wrong reasons. And he was finding it really hard to find somebody who was genuine and who really loved him for him. Wow. And I think when he saw that, he was like,
what else am I looking for?
Right, exactly. And and it wasn't easy because we had the cross-cultural side to deal with.
Of course.
And it, people look at us and they see interracial, but really I don't see us as being as interracial as I see us as being cross-cultural. It was a lot for him to say, okay, because there's a demand in the community for him to marry a girl from Benin, or at least from Nigeria, but certainly not a white girl from America. There was that certainly was not in the plan that everybody had for the Idahosa dynasty. So so it was a lot to overcome, and it was a lot for him. It took a lot of courage for him to say, this is who I want to marry, and I'm not going to change my mind, and you guys are going to have to adjust to it because this is my choice. Wow. So I really admire his courage, because marrying me took a lot of courage.
That's great. And I think it works both ways actually for you as well. Because you're basically uprooting and moving to a completely different country. So that takes a lot of courage as well. And so I wanted to ask, so in terms of, actually agreeing to get married to him, what part did your relationship with God play in that whole, decision-making process?
Massive. For me, I had to know, I'm one of these people that when it comes to making big decisions in my life, I have to have the peace of God. For me, I don't necessarily have to hear the thunderous voice of God, thus says the Lord, this is your husband, because trust me, during my single years, I heard that at least 10 times. Not because God was saying it, but because I wanted to hear God say it. I mean, I remember there's this one guy that came in a private jet to pick me up on a date. And I was just like, God, is this you? And I mean, I knew God was saying no, but I was like, I'm hearing it. It's God. But it wasn't. So I didn't really trust that thunderous voice, but I always trust the peace. I always trust the knowing that this is God's will, knowing that I have that rest of faith. And I believe that had a large role to play in making that decision. I had peace, and my husband had peace, and our parents had peace, which I think was an important component for us, because I was very loyal and committed to my father's ministry. And I was serving very diligently in what I was doing here in Delaware, and him in of course with his father's ministry and his parents' ministry in Nigeria. So knowing that our parents were in agreement and knowing that we had God's direction and peace was absolutely essential. And truthfully, we would not have married each other if we didn't have it.
That's great. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. I think you made a very important point there about actually being honest about your emotions, because sometimes I find that people, they're hearing their emotions, but they want to believe that this is God speaking.
Oh Lord, trust me, I was trying to fit God into anything, because I had some really phenomenal suitors, and but they weren't Feb. And trust me, nobody was Feb. I mean, no matter how wonderful somebody was, he wasn't Feb. And unless if it was Feb, I wasn't going to be happy. So,
so you always knew that.
I always wanted it. I didn't know that I always knew, but I always wanted it to be him. Because I've never loved anybody like I love him. And I don't think I could ever love anybody like I love him.
Fantastic. I love that. So in one of your interviews, I heard you say that before you got married, you had a no conditions clause for your marriage. So what is that, and why did you do that, and is it something you recommend for other couples?
Yeah, so when we got married, we made a commitment to each other that this was going to be forever. Now, of course, everybody says those words, but many people in their back of the mind are like, this will be forever so long as you don't cheat on me, so long as you don't beat me, so long as you always have an income, so long as you don't do this or you don't do that. And I believe that when you have a back door, then that's a glaring sign to the enemy that this is the place where I can hit them. So if her condition is infidelity, then that's where the enemy is going to hit you, is with infidelity. If her condition is don't touch me, don't beat me, don't slap me, well then that's where the enemy is going to come in and cause some type of verbal or physical abuse. So we decided that before we got married, we were going to close all conditions, and that no matter what happens, no matter where either of us err, that we're going to stay on the side of God, that we're going to stay on the side of forgiveness, and we're going to choose to remain together for the rest of our lives. And trust me, it has been tested. That no condition clause has not been something that we're just like, kind of stuck out there in the wind and then there's no testing. It's been tested. I mean, I've had challenges with him and he's had challenges with me, but we made a decision that we were never going to allow divorce to be in our vocabulary. And so we haven't, and it's really helped a lot. It's given me that confidence that I know that I'm loved unconditionally, kind of like the way the Heavenly Father loves us with an unconditional love. That's how Feb loves me, and that's how his love compels me to love him in return. Kind of like the Father and us, it's kind of like that Christ and the church relationship, and that's the pattern that we used to build our marital commitment on, was the pattern of Christ and the church.
Wow, that's absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, I have to say, it takes a lot of courage to make that kind of decision, and I think it also goes back to what you were saying before about trust, because you really got to trust that that person will have your best interests at heart, to go to that length of actually saying, if you do this, if you did that, if you that sort of thing, to trust to that level. it takes a lot. It really does.
It does. And plus, when you know somebody before you get married, you know what they're capable of and what they're not capable of.
Yes.
And he knows where my weaknesses are, and I know where his are. And we accepted each other's weaknesses without the whole thing of like, oh, well, Laurie, so long as Laurie changes in this area, then I'll marry her. Or as long as Feb changes in this area. No, I knew what his challenge areas were, and he knew mine. And so we were open with each other enough to say, this is where I might mess up. This is where I might be tempted, and say, we're gonna be together for the long haul.
Wow. I think that what that shows is that you clearly took a lot of time to actually talk about deep issues before you got married, and that's one thing that I tend to find missing in a lot of relationships. I feel that people don't talk deeply enough about real issues. So you go with all the romantic stuff, but then when it comes to real issues, people don't really go to that degree. So I mean, what sorts of issues do you feel that couples ought to be talking about when they're going through that whole process of trying to make up their minds before they get married?
Wow, well, that's like a book in and of itself. So I won't go too deep into it. But certainly, I don't think marriage is something that should be like a flash in the pan. I don't think that marriage should be something where you like each other, you love each other, you feel the butterflies, and you walk down the aisle all within the first 6 months. I think it takes time to build, and it takes time to know somebody, and you don't really know somebody until you've gone through some things together. You don't really know somebody until you've weathered some storms, and you've gone past the honeymoon phase of the relationship being so electric and chemistry and all of that. You need to get past the electricity, and you need to get into the actual see what it's like in the dark. So I believe that deep conversations are important. I think that there's all types of materials that are available out there that can help you expose some conversations that you ought to have. I mean, we talked about everything from how much debt I had. I mean, I was in some debt before we got married. I was a businesswoman, so I had some business debt. I had some real estate debt, but I was leveraging debt to do this and to do that, and it was working for me. But I had to be open with them about this is the debt that I have. This is I told him everything. Total disclosure. These are the account balances, and vice versa. This is my income, and vice versa. We talked about absolutely everything. His relationship with his mom, my relationship with my parents, what our expectations were going to be as far as in-laws, and how much commitment he was going to have to his family versus how much commitment he was going to have to me. And am I going to be your family, or are they going to be your family? And are we going to start a new family unit? All those things were so important to talk about. And when they were tested, we were able to go back to our foundation and say, listen, we talked about this. And we said that no matter what, you're going to stand for me, and vice versa. And so there's a lot of very deep conversations. The big one that everybody talks about is our sexual pasts. Do you tell somebody if you've had an abortion? Do you tell somebody if you've had a child? Do you tell somebody if you've been sexually active, and how many partners you've had, and all these other things? Because that's the one that's kind of a gray area. For a lot of people. They feel like, you know what, you can know that maybe I'm not a virgin, but you don't have to know everything I've ever done. And I think in that particular aspect, that a couple needs to decide for themselves how much information is necessary and how much information is just going to be torment. And so when you adjust to that, when you say openly, say, okay, let's say, for example, that both parties have been sexually active before marriage with other people. You get to the point where you say, okay, how much do you absolutely need to know, or do you need to just know that there was somebody, or do you need to know names? Do you need to know times? Do you need to know details? And I think that in our case, we were we were able to discuss exactly how much was important and how much wasn't important. And I think that's essential as well, so that you come to an agreement, and one person's not in the total disclosure mode while the other person is in the smoke and mirror mode. And honesty and openness is really, really so important. But work through it. Get books. I always tell people, get books, read blogs. I'm putting up a blog in the next couple of days about that, about the questions. The questions you need to ask before marriage.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's great.
So there's
Wait,
a
on
lot.
your
There's a
website?
lot. Yeah, on my website.
Fantastic.
So there's just a lot. There's a lot that people can access that can help. Help guide you through some of those harder conversations. And you might want to do it with a therapist or with a counselor or in your pre-marriage counseling, because doing it one-on-one can be explosive if you're not ready to manage the emotions that are attached to the information that you might find out in some of those premarital conversations.
Well, I've heard you say somewhere actually that you recommend that people do their premarital counseling before they fix the wedding date. Why do you say that?
Because the whole idea of the premarital counseling is to see if you can live together, is to see if you can be married. And like, why put yourself through the embarrassment of a canceled marriage, of a canceled wedding? A lot of people who go through premarital counseling, at the end of it, they find out that they're not well suited. And they really don't like each other, and they really can't accept each other the way they are, but they're stuck because they did it 3 weeks to the wedding, and everybody has already bought their tickets, and everyone has already bought their dresses, and everything is in motion. So have these conversations, get the counseling, get the advice before you make the big announcements, so that you have that opportunity to leave if you have to leave. Premarital counseling and engagement is not marriage. You can get out of it. And and I think that it's the reason for it is so that you can know if this is forever or not. So I encourage people, get all the counseling, support, strength, conversational guidance before you make it known to the whole world that you have a wedding day.
I think that's really, really sound counsel. Honestly, it really is. Really, because you never know what might crop up in the course of your counseling.
I remember, I'll just chip this in. I remember when we were doing our own premarital counseling, there was one day that we were down at my parents' house. My husband was visiting, and we're sitting in my parents' parlor, and my dad did some of our premarital counseling. And he says to Feb, he says, Feb, how sure are you from 1% to 100%? How sure are you that you want to marry Laurie? And Feb's like, he's like, well, and Feb is so honest. He's brutal. He has no filters. He's like, Feb, what you see is what you get. And so he wasn't trying to impress my dad at all. And so he's like, Pastor Gary, I think, I'm about 85% sure.
And you're thinking like, where's the other 15%?
Was like, thank you for your honesty. This is the end of our session, and this is the end of your wedding planning. My dad was like, until we get past that 15%, he said, if you have 15% left, then after you get married, you're still going to have 15% doubt. So let's work through that 15%. Let's put all the plans on hold, and let's make sure that 15% isn't your reason to leave. And so they worked through the 15%.
Wow.
And then without me, they wouldn't allow me in on those conversations. So even now, I don't exactly know what all they talked about.
What that 15% was all about.
I have an idea, but so they worked through the 15%, and then when he was 100, then we were able to continue with our wedding plans. But my dad was like, no more. I'm not paying another deposit. I'm not doing another thing until that is 100%. As far as I'm concerned, the wedding is off.
Well, that's absolutely amazing to actually be able to take that stand. I think it must have been fascinating to have your father do your premarital counseling.
Well, he did part of it. We had marriage counselors. We had too many marriage counselors. We had people from Nigeria to London to the US to telephone counseling. We had so many people that really took time and spoke into our lives before we got married. And I think one of the most impactful ones outside of our family was one of his uncles that sat us down and he drew pictures for us.
Mm-hmm.
And those pictures have kind of guided us all along. And he did a picture of a circle, and he said, in this circle is Feb and Laurie.
Right.
And then he drew another circle on the outside, and then another circle on the outside. And he said, these external circles are your children.
Right.
This external circle are your parents.
Mm-hmm.
This external circle are your ministries. This external circle are your businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, the center is you guys. And everything else is outside. So if you want anything else to work, what's in the center has to be whole and has to be complete, has to be in unity, has to be in agreement. And we've used that. It's helped us because when some of the in-law issues have come up and some of the business issues and ministry issues and challenges that we've had, of course, in so many ways, so many challenges over 18 years, but the challenges that we've had have come up, and as they have, we've come back to that center. And we've said, you know what, let's be centered together. When we're in unity, then everything else will work itself out. And some of it's just not as important as what we think it is. And so yeah, that's kind of that was some of the best advice we had.
That's brilliant. That's such amazing imagery. Very, very practical. I like
it. Helped us. It helped us a lot.
Absolutely. So it was in your book, Laurie's 22. You said something about save your sexy for your spouse. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, I think in today's society, there's so much of a demand for sex appeal. In everything from our social media pages to the way we dress and the way we portray ourselves. Sex sells and sexy sells. And God has crafted women in the most beautiful way. He gave us curves, he gave us here and there and everywhere, and he gave us so many attributes that we can enhance to really sell our image to the world. And unfortunately, whatever you put out there to the world, you can't take back. And you don't know who you're going to marry. And so if you put all your sex appeal out there on the street, there's nothing left to give your spouse. If everybody knows everything that you have in your package, there's nothing for him to unwrap. And so I really encourage women to be discreet. I encourage women to be modest and to really use wisdom as to how much they expose of themselves to the world, so that they can have something for their husband. Your husband should feel that he has access. He has full access to you, and not that he shares his all access pass with everybody on your Instagram or everybody that sees you walking down the street like, whoa, and for me, I can tell personally when I'm allowing myself to expose too much sex appeal. I can tell, and I have to rein it back in. I can tell when I'm getting a lot of male attention, or I'm getting a lot of DMs, or I'm getting somebody, people that are just like, hey, and there's different ways that guys let you know that you're putting off a vibe, and I'm very, very cautious with that vibe, because we all have it. We all have our sex appeal vibe. But it's not meant for anyone else. It's meant for your spouse. And so it's important that we contain it, so that the container belongs to him. Absolutely. Not to
I'm so glad you said that, because I mean that's such a big thing these days, and I think there's so much of a pressure for men to show up in a particular way, and then sometimes women wonder why they're not being taken seriously by the kinds of men they want to get married to. But it's all down.
And even married women are using their sex appeal to draw people in. I mean, I have a married woman friend of mine who does all these bikini modeling and things, and I'm just like, I keep thinking, right now she's in her 20s, and I'm thinking, okay, you and your husband might think it's cool right now, but once you start having kids, and once you grow up a little bit, you're probably going to regret some of this exposure that you've done. Of your body to the world, as a married woman. So,
Absolutely. Well, so let's kind of switch gear now into the married phase. So you've been married now for about 18 years. And I heard you say somewhere that the first few years of your marriage were not exactly, they didn't turn out how you planned it or how you
At all.
expected. Can you tell us
No.
a bit about that whole journey?
Well, because we had such a fairy tale romance, which I shared, because everything was so fantastic, I just assumed that everything would continue in that line.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, as much as we talked about the cross-cultural adjustments and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was really ready until I experienced it.
Right.
And mind you, my in-laws have been fabulous. I mean, they've been as caring as you can get, especially my mother-in-law, very, very understanding.
Mm-hmm.
However, when we first got married, I was living in her house, and I didn't understand that. I was living in my own house. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17. So I had been living independently for 10 years
Mm-hmm.
before I got married. I was very, very independent. I owned my own car. I had my own houses. I was doing my own life.
Yeah.
And so when I got married and I moved into the family house, that to me, that was like the rudest awakening. Because suddenly I'm under.
Was it expected? Was it by choice that you did that?
Yeah, it was kind of a complicated scenario because we had started building our house before we got married. We're building our house right on the compound of his family house, and so the house wasn't done yet, and the resources weren't there to complete it. So we were working hard to complete our house, but and so I wanted to move into an apartment. We had to live in Nigeria, but I'm like, Feb, let's go rent an apartment. Let's just do something. Let's be independent. And because of the nature of who he is, and the security situation in Benin and so many other factors, that wasn't an option for us. But I remember us, working through it, talking through it. I wasn't ready. His mom wasn't ready as well to turn that room around. So, I wanted to move to a different room. I wanted to move to a different apartment. I wanted to, let's rent a place, let's not mess up the museum. Let's leave the museum as it is, but I can't start my marriage in a museum. But we didn't get that opportunity. I had to stay there. And that helped me to understand a lot about their family dynamics and to understand about their culture and the value of Papa's memory. And now I look back and I appreciate that opportunity. I mean, it was Papa's Bible I was reading for my first year of marriage. He kept his father's Bible on the table, and so that's what I would read. And now I look back and I really treasure it. But at the time, it was hard. And I was sick a lot. I came into the marriage not ready for the malaria of Nigeria. And then also not ready for the cooking. I was expecting to be able to cook in my own kitchen and all of that. But I soon found out when I got married that I wasn't going to have access to the kitchen to cook, that I was going to have the house cooks, and my mother-in-law would tell them what to make, and we would eat whatever she told them to make. And that was so weird to me. So I started living off of peanut butter and jelly in the bedroom.
Oh my goodness.
I had like a little toaster in the bedroom and a microwave, and I was refusing to eat all the food. There was just so much drama that I put myself through unnecessarily as well. But it was just a lot of adjustment. And then we couldn't have children. I was hoping that we would be able to get pregnant right away, and that didn't happen either. And so there was the cultural adjustment, as well as my hopes were so high to we had this big 10,000 person wedding in Nigeria and 2,000 in America, and everything was just on this fast pace.
Wow.
And then I just thought we were going to go from that into pregnancy and giving birth, and none of that panned out the way we planned either. So there's just a lot that I dealt with culturally and emotionally and maritally in the first 5 years that really, I think, strengthened who we are today. The challenges that we go through make us better. They either make you leave or they make you stronger. And trust me, I had my days that I wanted to leave. I had my days that I called my parents and I'm like, I'm out. I can't hang. And I called my best friend and I'm like, whoa, what was I thinking? And she's like, come home, start again. Nobody's going to fault you. And I'm like, You know, I'm like, no, I'm in this thing, I'm in this thing.
You got that commitment that you'd made, hadn't you? So
yeah, but it was definitely tested. It was really
yeah,
tested.
yeah.
But we stayed, and we made it through, and we're stronger for it.
And that's why you're here to tell the story. That's amazing. So can you tell us a bit more about so that whole journey of infertility? Because I know that that's something that can be really, really challenging.
Yeah.
Just to walk us through what your experiences were. I know you've got 3 lovely boys now, so
Yes, we do. Praise
yeah.
the Lord. Yeah, so of course, you know, as I mentioned, we were trying to have babies right away.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, initially, I started on birth control, to be honest. He told me he wanted to wait a year,
Right.
but I went off birth control within like 3 months. I'm like, no way, that's not God's plan for us. I want to have babies.
Mm-hmm.
And so he agreed. But then in that first couple of months after being on the birth control pill, we were trying to get pregnant. It didn't happen. And so I was concerned. I thought maybe I had, you know, had an issue. Maybe I thought I messed it up because I took the pill. I didn't know. And so I came back to America with him, and we decided to undergo some testing to make sure that we were okay,
Right.
that we could have kids. And we went and they tested him and they tested me. And I remember the doctor sat us down, and we're sitting at a table kind of like this, and he's looking across
Mm-hmm.
at us, and he drew us pictures again. And he drew a little picture of a man and a picture of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And he started with the man, and he started begin to tell my husband all the problems that he had with male infertility.
Wow.
And which weren't things that we were aware of because he didn't have performance issues. His issues were more internal.
Yeah.
And so I hope I said that with tact.
That's really fine.
Yeah. So he drew the male picture, and he started saying all the challenges that he had. Then he drew a circle around it, and he put a big X.
Wow.
And he said, Feb, you can't have children. And then he drew the picture, he showed us the picture of the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And he began to outline the challenges that I had as well. I had PCOS, I had blocked tubes, I had an inverted uterus, I had endometriosis, I had several different issues.
Oh,
and so he took that same picture and he drew a circle around it, and he drew an X.
oh, wow.
And he said, I have 2 people sitting in front of me who are infertile. I have 2 people that cannot have children. He said, Feb, you cannot have children with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And Laurie, you cannot have children with anybody. He said, you can't have children independently, and you certainly can't have children together.
Good.
And that day, my heart was absolutely broken in 2. You know, but he told us that we had a way out. He told us that the only option that we had was in vitro fertilization.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have the option of IUI and so many of these other lesser methods.
Yeah.
He said we could do IVF, but we had to do IVF with something called ICSI, which is where they take the sperm and actually insert it into the egg in the lab
Right.
in order to fertilize it. And so we left there, and my husband looked at me and he's like, Laurie, listen, they told my parents they couldn't have kids, and here they had 4 biological children.
Wow.
So, you know, the devil doesn't have any new tricks. If, you know, he could try to do this to my parents, and he can try to do it to us, but I know that we're going to have our kids.
Wow.
And so I was like, you know what, Feb, I agree with you. God is a miracle working God, and he can do it and he will do it. But if you have a headache, you take Tylenol. If you have infertility, you take IVF. This is the prescription for the ailment that we have. And we can add our faith to it, and we will add our faith to it, but this is the pathway that the doctor says we have to go. So let's go it. And thankfully, as I shared earlier in the program, I had investments and things that I had made before I was married. And I'm not one of these people who believes in taking money from the church for your personal things.
Yeah.
So we used some of our investments that we had in the U.S. To start paying for our IVFs. We did the first one and it failed, which was always devastating. I think the first one is always the most devastating because you just expect it to work.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we weren't telling anyone in Nigeria what we were going through. But, you know, for anybody who's gone through infertility, you know that when you take these hormones, your tummy starts to, you know, bubble out a little bit. You start looking pregnant because you're taking pregnancy hormones. And I remember coming back to Nigeria after one of our IVFs, and my belly was a little bit puffy, and oh, the women in the church were so happy. I mean, they were hugging me and congratulations and calling me EA twins, mother of twins. And I knew that there was nothing there. I knew that I had an empty womb. I knew I wasn't pregnant. And it was just the hormones making me look like I was.
Yeah.
And it was hard to go through. It was hard to go through privately, but we did. And we had a lot of people that were looking at us, telling Feb, just not knowing that he had male infertility issues as well, and saying, this is proof that you should have just married an African woman. An African woman would have given you babies by now. And then also we had people who thought that because I was, what they call Oibo, which is what they call white people in Nigeria, people were like, because she's a white woman, she doesn't believe in family. White women, they don't want to have babies. White women are selfish. I went through a lot of, I would say, racial discrimination because of my color. People saying that because I was white, I was not a good wife. Because I was white, I wouldn't give them children. Because I was white, so many things
really
about that were unfair, especially knowing the struggle that we were having privately. But we went through 1 IVF, 2 IVFs, 3 IVFs, wasn't working. So finally, we went to a hospital in New York. We did our research and we found a hospital who at the time had the best outcomes in IVF. And so we went there, and it was a lot more money and a lot more stress to go to New York to do it. But we did our IVF there, and eventually we got pregnant.
Wow.
Through that IVF. We got pregnant, and I carried that pregnancy like an egg. I mean, I didn't come back to Nigeria. I remember on the train after they did the transfer of the embryos, I took a train back to Delaware. And I remember on the train, I stuffed pillows underneath of me and I put my legs up in the air. And I'm like, the baby's going to fall out, And I was just being so careful. But that pregnancy did result in the birth of a handsome baby boy.
Wow.
He was born on the 3rd of July of 2007.
Oh, wow.
And it was such a remarkable experience. We told the whole world we were pregnant. We told the whole world that we had the baby. Everybody was rejoicing everywhere. And then we had a tragedy that happened the morning after I delivered. I had a C-section because I wasn't, they tried an induction that was unsuccessful. So they had to do a C-section. And so I was in my room recovering from the C-section, and the baby was in the nursery. And the nurse comes in and she says, Mr. and Mrs. Idahosa, as she called us, Mr. and Mrs. Idahosa, there's a problem with your baby. You need to come down to the nursery. And we came down to the neonatal ICU, which was where he was. And when we walked in, this was like 5, 6 in the morning, we saw them doing chest compressions on our baby. And I had had a background in medicine. I was working in emergency medicine before I was married. He went to medical school. So both of us know that when they're doing chest compressions, that the baby is already dead and they're trying to resuscitate. And my world was upside down at that moment. One of my best friends had given birth the same day with me in the same hospital. And so her baby was in the bed next to mine, and she's a neonatal nurse. And so she was right there with her baby, and I'm right there with mine. Her baby's alive, my baby's dying. And I just remember her holding me, and it was so extremely emotional. And we had people praying all over the world, but unfortunately, on the 4th of July, the very next morning, our baby did die, and I can't even begin to tell you how emotional that was for us. I had never held my baby when he was alive. So they took me into a room and they handed me my dead baby, because that's what we do in the States. We give the woman an opportunity to still bond with her child even after death. And so I'm holding my dead baby and I'm touching him for the first time, and I'm crying and crying. But then there was this thing that happened on the inside of me where I just began to know that I know that I know that God was making me a mother.
Wow.
And it was like my dream was dead in front of me. My baby was dead. But I knew at that moment that this was not going to be the end of my story. I knew that something was changing. There was a faith And I can't begin to describe it, but I had more faith at that moment when I was holding my dead baby than I did while I could feel my baby moving around in my womb.
Wow.
I just knew that God was giving me my children. And we came back to Nigeria brokenhearted. We came back with empty arms. We came back devastated. And people some people were kind, but most people were not. We had people telling us, it's one thing to get pregnant, it's another thing to bring a living baby home. We had other people telling us that we made up the story. So because of that, my husband decided in church one day to take pictures of our baby and to take pictures of my pregnancy and put it up on the screen and tell people that we actually did have a child, because there was so much of a noise that we made up the whole thing, because social media wasn't prevalent at the time. So it was just a very trying period. But we began to put our energy into building a women's and children's hospital, because we felt that if our child could die in America, where we even had a helicopter en route to take care of him, how many more children in Nigeria are dying because of the infant maternal mortality rate, women dying in pregnancy and delivery. And so we decided to do something for others, kind of like Job, pray for his friends. And so that's kind of where that's the angle that we took. And we began to minister to people who had lost children, minister to people who couldn't have children. And as we began to give out, God kept strengthening us. Then in November of that same year, I still hadn't gotten a period after that delivery. And I didn't know, I had no idea when you're supposed to get a period after, because I'd never had a child before that. But we decided to do a pregnancy test, and we did, and it was positive.
Wow.
And,
without IVF?
No IVF, no doctor, nothing, just God intervening and giving us a natural pregnancy.
Wow.
And I went to the hospital immediately and did another pregnancy test, and that was also confirmed. Then we went to a place to do an ultrasound, and that confirmed it. So I'm like, I'm really pregnant. And my mom was visiting at the time, so my mom and I got on the next plane back to America. And I spent a lot of that pregnancy back in the US. And an interesting component of this story is that my first son was born on the 3rd, died on the 4th, and we buried him on the 9th. And on the 9th, at his funeral service, I had over 1,000 people show up for my son's funeral service. But at his funeral service, the bishop who flew in from Atlanta began to prophesy over my husband and I. And he told us, he said, a year from today, God's going to give your family a reason to rejoice.
Oh, wow.
And honestly, at that moment, I wasn't happy that he made that prophecy, because I knew that it was impossible. I just had a C-section. We couldn't do another IVF for a year. I just knew that there was no possible way. And so I remember after the funeral, I spoke to the man. I'm like, why did you embarrass me like that in public? Like, why would you do that to me? And he's like, I know what God spoke to me. Well, on the morning of the 9th of July of 2008, exactly a year later, exactly at the day that the man had prophesied, about 3 o'clock in the morning, my water breaks.
That is phenomenal.
Yes.
My goodness.
And
wow.
Interestingly enough, I was scheduled for a C-section that day. But I had already told my husband, I'm not going to the hospital. I'm not having my C-section.
Right.
Because I felt like we were pushing God's hand. I felt like the prophecy was the 9th. Here we are scheduling it for the 9th. It's too much. Like, and so then God was like, you know what? I'm going to make it so you don't have a choice. And so, so I had actually gotten into an argument with somebody the night before, and I was so angry with that person that my water breaks. And so we went to the hospital that morning, and we had our baby, and now he's 12 years old now, and doing phenomenally well.
That is amazing. God is awesome. That is such a fantastic testimony, and I'm sure it's so encouraging to people hearing that. And then you've gone on and you've had a second and a third.
Yes, and all naturally. They tested us again, and they told us that we were worse than before. But we did another IVF in between, which didn't work. Then we got pregnant with Nathaniel, and Nathaniel was born in 2011, November. Then, while I was still breastfeeding Nathaniel, I got pregnant. I was doing exclusive breastfeeding when you're not supposed to get pregnant.
Oh my goodness.
And I got pregnant with Judah, who was born just 13 and a half months after Nathaniel.
Wow.
So,
wow.
so God bless us with 3 wonderful boys. And I can tell you, he is so faithful, and the boys are thriving. They're doing great, and they're really a testimony to God's miraculous power and God's ability to restore. That everything that the enemy had tried to steal from us, he tried to steal our joy, our fertility, our peace of mind, our reputation. He tried to steal so much, but God has given us double honor for all the shame that the enemy tried to put on us.
Wow, God is so faithful, so faithful. Honestly, that is such a heartwarming testimony, honestly. And I'm just reflecting on how difficult it must have been for you both throughout that period, and how did you support each other through that whole period? Because it must have been really, really hard. How did you maintain the strength and the integrity of your marriage throughout that whole trying
It's true. You know, a lot of marriages break up over infertility, and a lot break up, especially after infant loss. A lot of couples just don't recover. But so what we did was we made each other our strength. Of course, we put God as the center of our home, but I didn't talk to anybody but my husband. I didn't, go and find a friend to confide in. I confided in him, and he confided in me. And we began to be very intentional about our communication and about our vulnerabilities. I mean, there were days that I would just cry, and I would cry, and I would cry, and I would cry. Wow. And he never exposed me. He never embarrassed me. He never, there were times that people would come to the house, and I couldn't come out to see them because my eyes were so puffy. Wow. And he would cover me. And I'm just so grateful to God for the way that my husband just supported me, and I supported him as well. I mean, he had his own emotional journey through the loss and through the infertility as well. And we just chose to strengthen one another through the word, through worship. For us, one of the strong influences that got us through the grief was the power of worship. Wow. We turned off everything in our house. No TV, no radio, no gossip, no influences, nothing. We just had worship music playing in our house 24/7. And that presence of God brought a strength to us that when we felt that we were at our weakest, we were at our most vulnerable, his presence just kept flooding us and flooding our home and flooding the atmosphere. And we just kept pushing in that presence of God, even when we didn't feel like it, even when we were angry with God, even when we were angry at our situation, and we were questioning why and how, and this isn't fair, and all these things. We just kept pushing that presence of God into our atmosphere. And as we did, God just kept strengthening us through worship and through the word and through conversations and communication and choosing to be each other's support. I could have gone on antidepressants. I didn't. I chose to not. It was my doctor actually suggested it to me. She said, Laurie, I can prescribe you something because I can see how deep you're going through. I can see the pain, and I can prescribe you something that will help you cover the pain. She said, but Laurie, I'm not going to cover your pain. She's like, you can find somebody else to do it, and they will prescribe you something. She was like, but I'm not going to prescribe you something. She said, I want you to go through the pain. She said, I want you to feel every tear. I want you to feel all the hurt. And I'm like, it's too much. And she was like, if you don't feel it, it's going to come out later in another way. Wow. And so I'm not going to cover it for you. I want you to go through it. And when you get through it, you're going to be stronger. And I am, and I was. And so I never took antidepressants. It was hard. It's kind of like healing without anesthesia, healing without pain medicine. But that's the journey that we chose to take. And that, for us, it helped us so much, because when we got through it knowing that we didn't hide any issue in a corner. We pushed everything out into the front, and we dealt with it. And that's really what strengthened us. And we dealt with it as a couple.
Yeah.
I didn't go through my own personal journey and his personal journey. We made the journey one. And
powerful. That's powerful. Which is one of the things, I always say to couples, when you're going through difficult times, you've got to remember that you're both on the same team.
Yes.
Because the problems always start when you start to see the other person as they're the problem, or they're the issue here.
Yes.
But when you walk through that whole journey as a team, I think it's absolutely amazing. And the beauty of having gone through all of that together is that now, out of understanding that whole pain, you can minister to people who are going through the same thing, and it's on a different level because they know you understand what they're going through.
Yes. I talked to a lady last night who just lost her child just a couple months ago. And, as I was sharing with her, I've never met her before. She sent me a DM. And as I was ministering to her, I could feel her pain because I felt it. And so I think when you've gone through something, you're in a good position to help other people. And that's really what we've done a lot in ministry is we've helped people that are hurting, people that are grieving, people that are facing impossible situations. And we've been able to stand for the miraculous in a different way. My father-in-law, his method of standing for the miraculous was, you speak to the person in the wheelchair, get up, and they get up. And my father, my biological father as well, the same thing. They kind of were in that generation of rise and be healed, and take up your bed and walk and all of that. And God still does that. But God also heals people through processes. And I think that my husband and I have seen the miraculous power of God, both in the immediate miracle, the suddenlies of God, but also in the process of healing, and the process of healing and faith and standing and believing and trusting when things look impossible. And going through the disappointments of real life. I think that's something unique that God has given us in our ministry, that we've been able to add to the great faith ministry of the Idahosa and the Whetstone dynasty. That we've been through a bit, and we can add that dimension of the human side. Because a lot of pastors and preachers are out there, they believe that they preach this faith that has no human face.
Absolutely.
Faith that isn't allowed to feel.
Yes.
And I believe that faith can also feel. And Jesus was one that was touched with the feelings of our infirmity. And when you allow yourself to feel, and you allow God to touch your feelings, you allow God to touch your emotions, you allow God to walk you through the healing process, I believe that you're a stronger, more stable person when you walk in your miracle.
Wow. My goodness. Wow, that's amazing. That's what makes you such a powerful encourager, and that's what comes out, in anything that you do online. Because I've seen it, having walked through that whole journey, and then helping people walk through that journey as well. Phenomenal.
Well, thank you so much for acknowledging that. That's why I use my little slogan, the heart beats faster, the heart beats best when it beats for others.
That's you. That's the reality of the life that you're living. That's fantastic. Wow. Okay.
But that's how I've been since I was a kid. Just have more opportunities as an adult.
Yeah. Indeed. I think one of the things that I see in your marriage is that it's quite clear that friendship is such a crucial part of the health of your marriage. It's so obvious from watching you and Bishop Feb that there's such a deep friendship there. And I suppose my question is, how have you managed to maintain that whole friendship throughout all the different seasons? And then, now you're so busy and you've got kids and all of that. How do you cultivate that?
We're extremely intentional with our friendship. Yesterday, for example, we literally talked for 3 hours on a video call.
Oh, wow.
He didn't have 3 hours and I didn't have 3 hours, but we made time because we needed to reconnect. And we have a commitment to one another that we will be each other's best friend. So I don't have a best friend outside of him, and he doesn't have one outside of me. So all of the energy that you would put into your best friend, we put into our relationship and our marriage. And we're just very intentional. We talk to each other about everything, and we talk to each other openly. When I'm having challenges, maybe with a temptation or with something that's happening that maybe wouldn't be a welcome conversation between a man and a wife, you know, or if he's having all kinds of ladies sending him pictures and, you know, whatever. Usually guys don't tell their wives these things. But we tell each other, and we don't have passwords. He has access to my phone. I have access to his. He has access to all my social media accounts. He can read everything. I can read everything on his. We just, and the truth is we don't. We have access, but I can't remember the last time I opened up his phone. It was probably like in those early first 5 years. But we give each other an all access pass. And we choose not to have secrets, and that helps a lot. It helps a lot. And also, it's a choice, and it's work, because there's a lot of things that happen. You're just like, I wish, you know what, it's not comfortable to tell him this. It's not comfortable to tell her this. If I do this, if I tell him or if I tell her, then we're going to deal with it for months. It's better just to keep it a secret and to just slip it under the rug. But we know that those things that you slide under the rug eventually become big piles, and they trip you up later. So we've chose to pull off the Band-Aid, pull off the plaster, and have those hard conversations as often as we need to have them. And so we talk, and you know, we stay in the same room. A lot of these, there's very practical things that couples don't do, which kind of, you know, affects their ability to stay connected in that friendship aspect. But yeah. And we share like a family calendar. So he knows everything I do, and I know everything he does. We've realized that some of those conversations are like, for me to tell him, to sit down with him and say, oh, Feb, tonight I'm on this program, and tomorrow I'm traveling to Lagos, and this and this it becomes exhausting. So we realized that, and for him to tell me the same. So we have a family calendar, and we put our schedules there, and then I can look at a glance like, oh, Feb's going to be in Port Harcourt this weekend, or, you know, and we just kind of understand ourselves that way. We do what works for us.
I love that. I love that whole intentionality. It's fantastic, you know, and it shows, you know, that you've done the work, and it's so evident in the kind of relationship that you have. Now, I'm curious about conflict. How do you manage conflict in your marriage?
We talk it out, you know, and sometimes it's a big talk, you know. Sometimes, I mean, I remember there was one time about maybe 8 years ago or so, that I had really disappointed him, and it was hard, and I felt so much shame. I felt so much, he's not going to forgive me. I had so much that the enemy was trying to use to try to make that conflict something that was gonna destroy our bond instead of bring us together. We choose to talk through the conflict. We choose to use the word as our standard. We don't use culture as our standard. So we don't look and say, you know, well, in the Benin culture, this is what you deal with a woman like this, or this is what you do with a man like this. Our culture is the culture of the word. So we don't adopt our marriage after the American culture or the Benin culture. Our marriage is adapted and adopted into the word. So we use the principles of the kingdom to guide us through it. And we talk, and we're honest. And I think that's how you get through conflict is you have to be willing to work through it and to stay in it for the long haul. And that's how we've been able to manage it thus far. And by God's grace, we'll continue to manage it that way in Jesus' name.
Amen. Wow, honestly, I love your authenticity and your honesty, because that's something that is rare. It's just absolutely amazing, you know, that you're so honest about, the challenges that you've walked through and how you've actually walked through them, because that's what people need to know.
Yeah.
That, the fact that something goes wrong somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that it's all over, when
No.
they can see that, you've been through that whole process and you've come out on the other side, and that's an encouragement and, an inspiration to other people. So thank you for being that authentic. I really appreciate it. I really, really
Thank you. I remember there was one in ministry. I was very, very unhappy in ministry in Nigeria because I was doing so much in America. And so I remember being in the headquarters church and just feeling stifled, feeling like the person who was only ever called out to pray for the offering. And I'm like, I can do more than pray for an offering. Hello, I'm a pastor. And I was feeling so stifled. And, his mother is there. So, it's basically him and his mother in the ministry, as opposed to the model of the husband and wife. It was the mother and son, and the wife was, I was just like, this is just not working for me. And so my husband gave me another opportunity, and he put me in another church and made me a senior pastor of another church so that I could flourish and I could flow and I could have that ministry opportunity. And it made our marriage stronger, even though I left him and I left the church and I left the where he was. And even though I was the bishop's wife, I still left and started pastoring my own branch. It just works so beautifully, and we don't have. So I said that to say that the answers don't have to be traditional answers. The answers don't have to be the things that everybody else has done. They don't have to be the cookie cutter responses. God can give you the wisdom of God to handcraft an answer for your own marriage. And that's what's ended up working for us beautifully. And we know that God's going to continue to give us those answers and that wisdom of God that might be unique to us. And I believe that's important for couples going through conflict, is to get the wisdom of God that's unique to your situation, that's unique to your marriage. And it may not be what somebody else has done before. You might be charting new pathways. But if it came from God, then He's going to give you the strength to walk in that light.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of of having someone who you can be open with, and also a husband that believes in you and believes in the grace that you carry, and is willing to actually let you express that gift. I mean, I know the church you pastor is still part of the Church of God mission.
Oh yes, it is.
But, giving you that room for expression, that's absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, he's the bishop over the church that I pastor. So, like, I'm actually a pastor under him and a wife under him.
Amazing. Wow, this has been fantastic. Honestly, I could go on like this forever. But I'm conscious that we're running out of time. So I'd like you to just give a few final words of advice for our viewers about building a successful home and a successful marriage, just to tie up the whole conversation.
Okay, so I would like to encourage all the couples that are out there that are looking for marriage, the people who are looking at getting married, and then those that are already married, to first build your relationship with Christ. Let your relationship with Christ be the center of your life. Build that foundation so strong, because when Christ is your foundation, the waves and the winds and the storms, they can all come, but they can't knock you over. And when you get two people who have a strong foundation in Christ, then you have two people who are, the Bible says two are better than one. And so you have double the power, double the faith, double the strength, and double the stability. So if you want your marriage to be stable, if you want your future life to be stable, it has to be anchored in Christ. In Him you live, in Him you move, in Him you have your being, in Him you everything. He has to be everything. And then trusting God to guide you to somebody who complements you, to somebody who is able to run with your vision together with you and that has vision themselves. And then inside your marriage, to keep Christ the center. But just like our marriage counselor advised us, keep all the external influences and voices external, and listen to each other and listen to God, and be one. That's why the Bible talks about, and the two shall become one flesh. You should when you're really putting Christ as the center, you are one. You're one in mind, one in body, one in motivation, and nothing can break one, but things can break two. So when you're married, you're supposed to be one together, not two separate entities trying to mesh, but you're one flesh. And so I just want to trust God and believe God with you that He's going to give you the desires of your heart. He's going to strengthen you where you feel weak, and He's going to give you the ability to forgive, to understand, to listen, to heal, to restore, and to really walk in the fullness that He has for you in your home, in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. That is so powerful. Thank you so very much. So where can people find you online if they want to connect with you online?
Okay, so on Facebook, my official page is just my name. It's Laurie Idahosa. And then on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Idahosa Laurie. So all other platforms, and on YouTube, it's also Laurie Idahosa. So Laurie Idahosa or Idahosa Laurie, either way, you can find me. And I'd love to connect with you online as well. And my blog, you can visit it on my website, which is laurieidahosa.com. So yeah, so follow up, let's connect, let's stay connected, follow me, subscribe, do all those things. And it'll be fun to stay connected and to see how God uses you in your own journeys too, in Jesus' name.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much. Honestly, I'm so grateful, so honored that you could come on the show, and I've learned so much from what you have shared. Thank you so much. I hope we get to do this again another time.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Conversation that should go on and on. But I really appreciate that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. I appreciate that.
And you're doing a phenomenal work with this show. This program is remarkable. I told somebody I was going to be on your show, and they're like, "Oh my God, she's my idol!" So you're really making a big impact. And that person was in Canada. So
wow,
yeah,
wow.
You're really making an impact, and I thank God for the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate you, Reverend Laurie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So that's it, viewers. It's been a fantastic discussion. Really appreciate you for spending this time with us. And until I see you next time on TomiTalks TV, take care and bye for now. God bless you. Bye.